Okay guys, what's going on? Welcome to RxMVP testing. So I'm going to continue on this series because I want to show how unit testing is done. So essentially what I've done is set up a standard unit test or home presenter test. We've set up a before method and we're going to go through the stages of building a unit test for a presenter in this case. Now we need to take a look at our build.gradle because there's some extra stuff been added. And this is the Google Truth library because we're going to be using Truth for doing a search because it's an amazing library. We're going to be using Mockito because Mockito is a really good library for doing mocks. We don't have to make our own mocks, which is terribly time consuming. And of course, we're going to be using JUnit. So let's get started. Let's start off our test. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to obviously create an instance of a presenter to do our testing. So we're going to say private home presenter dot equals new home presenter. And if we look at it here, we need a home view and a home model. Now the thing is, we can't make an instance of a view because this is a unit test. It's not running on Android. So we're going to mock it. So how we're going to mock it, we're going to create our home view up here and our home presenter. Our home model, sorry. Home model. And we're going to pass those to the presenter. Now the problem is the presenter will try and talk to these classes and will complain because they're null. So let's make them non-null. So we're going to use Mockito for this equals Mockito.mock home model.class. I know I could use mocking annotations, but I want you just to see how this all fits together. So we've mocked all our views. Now we've mocked our instance. We're ready to go for actual testing. Okay, so with that, all we need to do now is actually look at our presenter and see what we want to test. So if we take a look at the construction of a presenter, we see we have these nice onCreates and onDestroy methods as public. But if you look here, we have these, they're the only methods. So what we want to do essentially is we want to mock our view to do nothing and mock our model to do nothing. Okay? Then what we can do is we can tell them, or we'll mock them to do defaults, and then we can basically change our mocks in each test. Say, okay, when, it's going to be a lot easier if I show you because this is a bit confusing. So our home view, we need to do some mocking. So we're going to say Mockito.mock home view. Home view is the easiest one to mock. Home view dot get username edit, and we're going to say dot then what? Oh, sorry, it's when. Dot then return just equations, okay? Then we need to say Mockito dot when home view dot observe button. Because it's a button, we're going to say then return observable dot never. Now this is a very important point. If you're observing a button action, you mock it using never by default. You do not use empty. And the reason behind this is empty sends a complete event, which means the button is deactivated, which we don't want to imply. And never basically means that the observable is still open. It means there's a button there, but there'll never be an event of any kind. So it means nothing happens at all. It's very important you use that for mocking buttons. Let's see what else we got here. We've got nothing really else. We've got some fields we've access to because the presenter tests and the view and all that are in the same package. So that's all we need to mock for the view. So let's talk about the model. When get repos from save state. Now this is a data, so when we want to say this, we want to basically then return observable dot empty. So we always default now to the fact that there is no save state. So to build up our mock behavior, essentially, get user repos, mockito.anyString, then return, what's this returning? Observable list of GitHub repos. So we'll say .return observable .just, and we'll make up a list. So we're going to have some mock data. So we'll say private list. It doesn't matter if the list is empty or not. You can just say it is. So I'm going to say mock repos equals new array list 0. And we're going to return an observable that returns just that, which means essentially this is the equivalent of saying an instantaneous return or an instantaneous next event. We don't have to fill in the mock repo list because we've a mock result. It doesn't matter what the result is, only that the result is the same when we go to check it later and we go to verify. So let's see what else is on that home model that needs to be mocked. Quite a bit of setup here. Save, these are both void, so we don't need to mock anything for those. Okay, so we're good to go. So let's write our first test. So let's have another look at the presenter. So one of the things it's going to do is going to try and load from the save state. Model.getRepo from save state. It's going to pass that repo list into view.setMessage. Lookup button clicked, GitHub repo list. Okay, so let's test this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a test. Test annotation for JUnit. Public void on get repo save state. Okay, so that's our test. So as you can see here, nothing's going to happen because we've mocked everything. So what we want to test is there's two cases we want to test. Okay, repo save state, no data. So our mock is going to essentially be updated. We're going to get rid of the defaults, and we're going to say we're going to pass our mock repos back. We're going to say that the repos are empty. The save state is empty. So then we're going to call our actual method on create. So when we call on create, it's going to subscribe, going to do that, and it's going to pass that to the set message. So what should never happen is, because this is an empty thing, there should never be a set message call. So we're going to say mockito.verify home model, or home view, sorry, and never, if I can spell it, mockito.never.setMessage mockito.anyString. So now what this will do essentially is it'll say if there is no observable, or if there is nothing in the save state, when an onCreate is called, verify that the message was never set. So if we click run, my computer is starting to spin up its fans. Has to do a bunch of work, so the computer is spinning up. Okay. So we're starting to get some issues. It's complaining about looper not being mocked. So we'll need to figure that out very quickly. So observe lookup button. What? Oh, okay. So what it's trying to do now is this is sort of a classic issue with this. So basically, this isn't scheduling correctly because it's okay. Because this is being passed as a parameter to a method, which is circular braces. It's not a lambda. This is getting executed immediately. Unfortunately, our test isn't running in the Android framework. It's running in Java in the JVM. So we need to mock our schedulers. So we can do that very simply by setting the scheduler's hook. So we need to say, I've got some code here saved to the side, but essentially all we need to say is to reset our schedulers as private, or no, it's not even private, or in our setup method, before anything, Rx Android schedulers hook dot get, oh feck, it's not even that, it's plugins dot get instance dot register schedulers hook new Rx schedulers hook. I need to override get main thread scheduler to return schedulers.immediate. So this will return the Rx Java scheduler now instead of the main thread scheduler that goes instantaneously, executes whatever happens. So let's try that. And our test passes. Excellent. Great stuff. Now the problem is this scheduler stuff is quite frustrating because your Rx Java is controlling all this. What about IO threads and all that kind of stuff? Well, we're going to have to set all this stuff each time. However, there's a very useful class that I tend to copy in. It's from Ribbit or RIB or RIBot or something. I don't know. It's his Android Boilerplate project, and GitHub has some great code for this. So we're actually going to get rid of this. And if you look in here, we have this class from his code. I'll link to this in the description because it's a great bit of code. But essentially, it's a test rule that will automatically apply all this. It'll automatically make all your Rx Java code single-threaded for your tests, which is brilliant, and it saves a lot of time. So let's create a rule, and we're going to say private Rx schedulers override rule, schedulers rule override rule equals new Rx schedulers override rule. And now if we run our test, it should work, because it must be public, because I'm an idiot. We'll run that again, and even though you can't see it, I'll just pull it up. Our test passes there. So that's great. Let's try another test. We're going to have, say, has data for the next test. So we're not going to return observable.empty. We're going to return observable.just. And we're going to pass in our mock repos. And we're going to verify once we go to the actual presenter itself. Where are you? That this message is actually set. Now normally you wouldn't have the string inside the presenter, you'd have the view, say mock repos here. Normally what would happen in this case is you would have the view being set, the GitHub repos directly, and it would format the message internally, but you would just say, okay, that was passed. But anyway, oh god, we need to say, whoops. We need to say this is times 1. So if you just say verify.set message without passing in a times variable or never, or at least, this will essentially default to ×1. So let's run our unit test. And you can see both our tests are passing nicely. So let's write a more complicated test, shall we? Let's take a look at the presenter. So we should observe this lookup button. So what's the lookup button doing? It's calling set loading, getting the username, calling model with the username, saving the repo state, setting the loading false, and then starting a new activity. So let's verify that all that happens. So we're going to test, what's the method? On lookup button clicked. So this is to verify that the behavior works, okay? For the presenter. Now these aren't technically unit tests, they're more like functional tests or integration tests. It's really strange. It's sort of blurring the line between integration tests and unit tests, because a unit test tests individual logic, while this is sort of testing that all the logic is connected correctly. So it's a bit of a strange scenario. So anyway, what we need to do first of all, we need to say when they get the repos, they return the mock repos. That's correct. We also need to change how the button behaves. So this observe button, we're going to change this to observable.just null. Now what this will do essentially is this will say, as soon as that presenter goes, I'm going to observe you, the button will say, I'm pressed immediately. It's essentially the equivalent of a user tapping the button instantaneously on startup, which obviously doesn't happen, but that's what it's essentially the same concept. So view set loading. So we need to get the thing from the save state. We need to set up our mocks. Model.get user repos for username. So we need to mock that one. I don't think I mocked that. Yeah, get user. Yeah, so we need to remock this. Get user repos. The save state one I don't think is relevant for this. But we need to mock this. Get user repos. And we need to say it's our mocked. It's our twisted equation. So we want to say when that gets passed, we need to say, okay, it's equal to this. I'm actually going to copy paste because you never know. You always spell things wrong, and then you're wondering why your test doesn't work, and then you spend multiple hours, and then you realize you're terrible at your job, and yeah, you know, normal programming life. Anyway, anyway, so we have save state, which is irrelevant. Do show first, okay, and then model.start repo activity. Okay. So when on create happens, we want to verify that the home view had set loading. So this is times 1 set loading show loading, and we want to say mockito.equals true, eq true. Okay, we also want to verify at least once it was told false. Okay, great. So that's the two loading interactions. Get user repos. We want to make sure that the state was saved. So we just say home model state, and the list is the mock repos. That's what we're passing. We want to make sure that that got passed out of our model and back in. And we just want to make sure to validate that the method to start the activity was called with the repos. Okay, so let's run this test and hopefully it'll all work. Okay, so it's complaining about the amount of times this method was invoked. So this method was invoked twice. Yeah. So we need to make sure that it was invoked twice, actually, because it's invoked once for true, once for false. So we need to make sure that it was invoked once for each. This is actually quite confusing. I've never really got around how to test it. So anyway, we can test that it was invoked twice. Oh, I know what's happening. I'm an idiot. So if we look at our presenter, you see here on the last one we're saying do on each, okay? So when we switch the map, it's sending an incomplete event, so it does need to be times 2. There we go. So it's getting, the view is actually getting told twice to hide the loading, and the reason behind it is because it's saying, okay, on each means on the event gone by and the complete event gone by, it's asking to do that. Yeah, because it's technically completing, but not really. It's kind of like a soft complete. Anyway, enough about that. There we go. So now we've wrote a unit test for our class that verifies all of its behavior. We force everything onto one thread with one easy little JUnit rule. Our tests are all there. We're verifying everything, and now the behavior of our presenter is now tested. Ta-da! That's essentially unit testing with this pattern. The views, I don't unit test. Why? Because it's too tricky, to be quite honest. It's very hard to test views. It's a massive pain in the butt. So I don't test them. And to be honest, your view is kind of visually tested anyway, because in reality, what you're actually doing in here is minimal. You're only really setting data and pulling data out. This isn't actually processing any events. And then the model, well, the model is just really forwarding on stuff. So in here, it's really just sort of starting activities and doing some basic stuff. So, you don't need to test any of this. Like, come on, it's literally just saving the state, pulling the state out. So it's handling all like the translation from your data into the system. So it's like it's a proxy class. That's all it is. You don't need to test it. It's irrelevant. And that's it. So we're going to do a little bit of a git commit. Git add all. Git commit. End of video 5. testing, and then we're going to say git tag video 5end git push origin master tags, and this will go blasting up onto GitHub instantly. And there we go. It's now on my GitHub account. So that's it for this video. I think this will complete the RxMVP series. If any of you have questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. I might do a video answer to them. I generally respond to the comments though, because there isn't too many. And yeah, that's it. See you next time.